back, the ship back to, the ship goes back
Or
to,
it's not working. Every second it freezes.
Okay, I'm watching on my cell phone because the signal in the apartment I'm staying in, it doesn't always reach my computer. So I set
I
up
had
my
trouble
phone-
yesterday with my home computer with the signal,
I don't.
something,
No,
so.
well, there's a problem.
Yeah,
in the
this,
building
the
where I'm staying.
volume.
I can't even get regular TV because the signal doesn't reach.
Hey,
Yeah.
Rabbi, how you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Rabbi.
It freezes. There.
Mary is there, but she hasn't, and Ray is there, they haven't got their
She's
photos.
got an issue with her camera.
Ah,
yes.
my camera has fallen behind desk, she says.
Yeah, she's gonna have
Okay.
to have Remus come by and take care of it.
Okay, well, we'll listen
Well,
to you guys.
Larry,
Oh, how cute.
Okay, I'm gonna
Aw.
try again here.
Miriam.
because it's
Miriam,
terrible.
we only see your eyes.
yes,
Okay, where are we? I'm reading the Perek. Is it Perek Bet today? Because I couldn't find
Olive,
Olive. I
Olive.
couldn't find Olive. Wait here.
we're missing, Riva.
Yeah, we don't have Reba. There's Olive.
Yeah.
Okay. Drama and meaning of reliving
Yes.
history.
Yeah.
Right. There, now we see your lovely face.
Okay,
Or as what I call this Parsha, who is the real fugitive?
Rabbi, you are co-host, and we are recording.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Let us begin with the blessing if we can, sir. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'tzitav b'tzivanu lazot b'rei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us and commanded us to engage in the word of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Hey, Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie, wherever you are. I don't see you, but
We're gonna start with Olive, Olive,
oh, there she is. Hi, Bonnie.
the drama and meaning of reviving history. So Rabbi, I'll let you begin.
Good morning, everyone. The Parsha this week is Ki Tavo. And we're doing Perek Aleph, the drama and meaning of reliving history, which begins on page 157. This is includes a section which is possibly one of the oldest sections in the entire Torah, it goes directly to Sai's question from the last few weeks: is what's going on in the surrounding tribes, the Hittites and the Jebusites, and apparently very, very early, maybe 3,000 years ago, the Israelites developed this tribal pledge or tribal statement. And I'm not that familiar with oaths, that are done in different organizations. The Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts have like a little oath that you recite that talk about what it means to be a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout or something like that. Does anybody know anything like that?
It starts on my honor.
Yes.
On my honor. Yes, she's right. I'm trying to think. I used to know this.
So this is very similar, and it starts with a story of origins. So if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 26, and if you have a Tanakh, an English version of any Torah or Tanakh, you can look it up. I'm going to just read you a few sentences. When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess, and you possess it, and you settle in it, you shall take some of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket and go to the place
Why are we
the
reading?
Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for your name. You shall go to the priest who is in office at the time and say to him, today I declare to the Lord your God that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our ancestors to give you. When the priest takes the basket from your hand and sets it down before the altar of the Lord your God, you shall make this response before God. And here it is. A wandering Aramean was my father. He went down into Egypt and lived there as an alien, few in number, and there he became a great nation, mighty and populous. Then God brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with a terrifying display of power, and with signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with
Milk and
Milk
honey.
and honey.
So now I bring the first of the fruit of the ground that you, O God, have given me. And there you go. So yes, Pam.
Unmute.
Why does sometimes it say the fugitive Aramean and sometimes the wandering Aramean?
Oh, okay. Well, now, so this whole thing, I'm arguing this whole thing is very, very old, maybe 3,000 years old, maybe before the kings, and somehow the tribe of Israel developed this kind of pledge. You know, how do you know somebody's an Israelite? That you say to them, are you an Israelite? And they said, yes. How do I know you're an Israelite? And he'll start saying, a wandering Aramean was my father. Now, Pam asks about some of the wording. Well, partly this is translation, but on this particular thing, there's a lot of controversy about how it should be translated. And we'll see that in Harvey Field's commentary. Most of the medieval commentaries completely change the meaning, completely, totally, to the point where it's just totally shocking. Like they don't, you know, Pam is just suggesting, what did you, instead of a wandering Aramean, you said a fugitive Aramean. That's nothing. They do away with the whole thing and they completely flip it. Now, part of it is the Hebrew. The Hebrew is obscure. You know, it's really hard to understand what it means, like almost impossible.
Your volume.
And hi, Larry, good morning. Hi, Larry.
Morning.
So it's really, really hard to understand what it's talking about. But in terms of fugitive versus wandering, I mean, that's basically, in both cases, you know, our father was an Aramean coming somewhere from Iraq, basically, and he was traveling, whether it was wandering, as in taking a cruise and we're wandering through Alaska, or a fugitive, meaning running away, he's still traveling. And we'll see in just a few minutes that that's not how most of the medieval commentators, and particularly Rashi, do not understand that side.
Yeah.
I've noticed that God has disappeared. There are no more, there aren't any actions by him directly. Everything is being run by Moses. He keeps quoting and he keeps giving directions, so to speak. He's telling the Israelites what to do. I get the feeling that God has finished with this whole thing now, and it's up to the Israelites to carry on. Is this true?
Well, that's certainly one interpretation. I mean, I don't know. But this is one of the most famous quotes. And where may you recognize it from? not just from the book of Deuteronomy. Lorraine, does this strike you as familiar from anywhere else? Somewhere where we do once a year that you may remember. Marcia?
Unmute.
Passover.
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 There you go. Right.
Haggadah.
Right. So, and it's not in every version of the Haggadah, but it's in many of them. There's certainly the traditional ones. So that's a brief introduction. When you know, if you've read ahead, you know that the medieval commentaries completely change it. And even then, it's not clear exactly who it's referring to. So I guess we should just get started with the text, and you'll see as it develops. Minya.
I have a question on the
And
section.
Minya, I got a nice email from your husband yesterday, so
That was from me.
well.
Was that a beautiful Torah? A beautiful prayer book?
Yeah.
That was a beautiful prayer book. That's why I sent it to you. But anyway, my question has to do with the Targum section. It
Yes,
says there that if you do everything the way the Torah tells you to, you will be blessed. And then on the next page, it talks about Moses dividing the two different groups of tribes, those that were very good and those that were not so good.
right.
So my question is, did all the things that happened to Jews throughout history happen because they were the so-called bad followers of the Torah versus the good followers? And is that why there have been times where anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head more than other times? Because those are the people who do not follow the Torah.
Well, that is a very traditional explanation. That's what some of the ultra-Orthodox rabbis would argue. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As a Reform rabbi, I would never take that position. But what position would I take? You know, there's, you know, I would not give an answer. You know, there's no answer to such a question. But I don't see what the Torah says here as, you know, 100% blueprint for the future. And so I would be extremely reluctant to take that position.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments here at this point? B, Miriam, Bonnie, Babette, Riva, Larry, Steve.
I'm ready to start.
Okay, who'd like to read? Bottom of page 157, left-hand column, Perek Aleph. Okay, Minya.
The drama and meaning of reliving history. In these speeches to the Israelites in the desert, Moses focuses on the future when the people have already conquered the land of Israel and are enjoying its harvest. At that time, he tells them they are to take every first fruit of the soil, put it in a basket, and go to the place where God's name will be established. Once at that sanctuary, they will present the basket to a priest, saying, I acknowledge this day before Adonai our God that I have entered the land that Adonai swore to our ancestors to give us. As the priest takes the basket, the Israelites are to continue their ritual drama with the following declaration. Arami Oved Avi. My father was a fugitive Armenian. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there, but there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to Adonai, the God of our ancestors, and Adonai heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. Adonai freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm, and awesome power, and by signs and portents. God brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil that you, O Adonai, have given me. One can easily imagine participating in such a ritual, filling the basket with first fruits, presenting it at the sanctuary, and reciting the declaration. But what is the purpose of this ceremony? Several commentators point out that the ritual of declaration constitutes one of the only prayers found in the entire Torah. Its meaning, however, is a matter of dispute.
Okay, Min, you start right there because after the next sentence, we start getting into the alternative interpretation. So what do we have so far?
The ritual of presenting the first fruit.
Okay, it sounds like a great ritual. So Miriam is coming to Jerusalem from her condo in Netanya, and she's going to assemble, or somebody's going to assemble for her, a basket with all sorts of fruits. You could see,
Right.
like Jerusalem florists or Jerusalem fruit people, having a nice business putting this together. So Miriam doesn't have to schlep it all from Netanya. She can just pull out her credit card in Jerusalem and get a nice big basket with fruit. Then she takes that to the temple and she presents it to the Kohen. He puts it on the temple shelf, and then she makes that declaration that we read. My father was a wandering Aramean, and then Miriam gets credit for the first fruit ceremony, and the fruit is distributed. I guess she gets some back, and the Kohen, which might be me, takes some, gets a percentage, and the ceremony is complete and everybody's happy. It seems to be a prayer or a declaration, and one of the very oldest ones in the Torah. All sounds good. It's a beautiful ceremony. It's particularly nice because we usually associate the temple with killing animals. So this is no killing animals. It's not killing even bugs. It's just presenting fruit. Very harmless, very vegan friendly, very sweet, and very enjoyable. So far, so good. And very ancient, very ancient. Okay, comments so far. Okay, Minion, now some of the medieval commentaries, notably Rashi, completely reverse this interpretation. Okay, Marcia, did you want to say something?
Steve had his hand up forever.
I do.
Okay, Steve?
Sounds like Sukkah. Sounds like Sukkot, when we harvest the fruits and, say the prayer. Similar situation.
Correct. So this seems to be part of the 3 pilgrimage festival cycle, and it's designed. It's also the Kohanim, of which I keep reminding you on one, so you don't forget. This is how they earned a living, and so and it was very important to them and to others and to the Levium and to whoever was running Judaism at the time. Was not rabbis. There were no rabbis yet. To make sure everyone focused on Jerusalem temple, not anywhere else. All ritual took place in Jerusalem temple, and therefore all religious policy emanated from the Jerusalem temple. So we're autonomous, right? In Sun City, we have a religious practice committee. If our religious practice committee decide that we're going to do something, we do it. We don't have to consult the people in New York or Jerusalem or anything like that. In those days, they did not want that happening. They wanted everything centralized. Miriam.
Does our fruit basket that we have, does that sort of come back from there?
Yes, it's based on this practice. Yes.
Yeah, good question.
Yes, and I presume, this is exactly what we're talking about. So I would presume that's where that came from. Yes, absolutely. And this is a custom that you see how it has very ancient roots. But on the other hand, in modern Judaism, it's kind of fallen by the wayside, right? So Miriam points out that we still kind of have it there, but it's not directly in our consciousness the way, I don't know, even something trivial and much later, like eating apples and honey on Rosh Hashanah is. Everybody here would know that and where it comes from, what it's for. But this custom, much less so. And part of that is Rashi's fault, right? Look at what Rashi's going to do with this interpretation. Okay, so the three words we're talking about in Hebrew are Arami, Oved, Avi. Arami, an Aramean. Oved, it means work, maybe. Avi, my father. And that was translated here as my father was a wandering Aramean, but that's by no means the only way to understand those three words. Arami, Oved, Avi. Okay, back to you, Minya.
Some interpreters, including the author of the Sifri and Rashi, insist that the translation of Arami, Ovid, Avi is an Aramean sought to destroy my father, meaning that Laban, for whom Jacob worked 20 years, intended to destroy him. This interpretation, as we shall see, is followed by those who authored the first Pesach Haggadah. Rashi's grandson argues that the Armin mentioned is not Laban, but Abraham, who was born and raised in Aram Naharam. Others following Abraham ibn Ezra point out that it makes no sense to identify Laban or Abraham as the Aramean. Instead, Ibn Ezra claims Moses is referring to Jacob, whose mother had come from Aram Naharam, who was persecuted there by Laban and who fled from the oppression of famine into Egypt, where Joseph was in power and could assure the survival of Jacob's family.
Okay, stop. So what is this alternative interpretation which bothers me so much, Pam?
Well, it's the whole thing about not knowing which one of these is the real wanderer. I mean, I thought it was pretty straightforward, that who it was, but you know, is that a big deal that we have to know who it was, or?
No, but what before we talk about who it was, how does Rashi interpret this verse completely differently than the way I interpret the reverse? Miriam.
Miriam, you have to unmute. Unmute.
Muting.
There you go.
I keep thinking that they're all Arameans, really. They're all like converts.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. But remember, how we perceive ourselves or how we want to perceive ourselves may be different than the objective reality, right? The Israelites may have been just another Aramean tribe like all the other Aramean tribes, but they're trying to distinguish themselves, right? And this pledge or this prayer, as Harvey Fields calls it, is clearly an attempt, in the original formulation, an attempt to say our father was a wandering Aramean. But how does Rashi interpret it differently? Before we get into Pam's question about who this person is, what is the different interpretation of those three words? Arami, Oved, Avi.
Minya has her hand up.
Minya.
Well, from what I see, it's Rashi is saying that he's using the word destroy my father instead of just saying my father was a fugitive.
Right. Completely shifts it around. Instead of saying my father was an Aramean, Pam, right? He's saying now an Aramean wanted to destroy my father. So instead of my father being the Aramean, my father was being chased by the Aramean. Completely changes the entire meaning of these three words. Remember, we're talking about 3 words, that's all. So what we really should do is give this to B, and she can do a little Hebrew investigation and just explain what the 3 words actually mean. But apparently it's not that simple, because the 3 words are really hard to, I mean, I have no idea. My Hebrew's, I think, quite good compared to most rabbis. I lived in Israel, as you know, and I did my rabbinical school and my PhD there, and I have no idea. I mean, the first word is clear. Arami is an Aramean. The third word is clear, my father. But the key second word, Oved means in modern Hebrew to work. But that's clearly not what it, so it could change the entire meaning. Now, where does Rashi get this completely different interpretation from? There's obviously a tradition going around. Then Pam asks, if we accept Rashi's translation, then the question is, who is this Aramean who's trying to kill my father? And who's my father as well? So all of this is very obscure. I don't like it, because the ceremony was so nice the other way. I like positive things. We're trying to recruit new members, right? And we want a religion that's upbeat and positive and can inspire people in this time of COVID and lockdowns and economic instability and rising home prices and all this. So I like the first fruits, and this story about my father, meaning my ancestors, were wandering Arameans. They're like ancient shepherds with camels, and it sounds very romantic. Lawrence of Arabia, or I don't know, something out of those old movies. Now suddenly I got to explain that no, there was conflict, not just conflict like we have in the temple periodically, but really potentially violent conflict. Somebody's trying to kill my father. I don't like it. Pam.
Isn't Abraham more identified as a wanderer than Jacob?
Yes, correct.
So I would think that Abraham, to me, is the most logical candidate to be this person.
Okay.
Because we never really talk about the wanderings of Jacob, but Abraham has, I see more of that anyway.
Okay, I mean, so now if we're trying to identify the people involved, if you accept Rashi's explanation, then somebody's trying to kill our Aramean ancestor. Who's our Aramean ancestor? It could be Abraham. Pam says it's Abraham. Other people say it's Jacob. Side.
I kind of go along with you, Rabbi. Another thing that I don't like is, how did they get to the land of milk and honey? They had to kill a lot of people. The Canaanites were living there. What happened to that whole chapter? We never hear anything about it. Can you advise me on this?
That we don't hear anything about what?
About they're taking over the land, the so-called land of milk and honey. There were people living there. What happened to those people?
Yes, well,
They
the
had to
Torah,
fight them.
the Tanakh does talk about it. And according to Tanakh, the Israelites invaded and had wars and beat some of these tribes. But there's no archaeological evidence any of these wars really took place. So, the suspicion is maybe the Israelites were already there, and they're inventing an invasion, a conquest, to give more of a dramatic, religious history. But we don't know. As I talk about on Friday night, sometimes the archaeology is moving quite quickly. But the famous case is the walls of Jericho. And they found that there were no walls of Jericho at the time that Joshua supposedly knocked them down. The walls were built later. Okay, back to, so we have my father could be Jacob. My father could be Abraham. Depending on who it is, then who's trying to kill him would also differ. We have Rashi arguing that the Aramean is Abraham. I'm sorry, that was Jacob. And then who is the person trying to kill him? If it's Jacob?
His father-in-law.
So we know the whole story about his father-in-law, right? But we didn't know his father was trying to kill him. We know that maybe through work, but not through killing. Like his father-in-law is the one that tricks him with Rachel, right? So, and if I was Jacob, I would have killed my father-in-law after that, right? I worked 7 years for the love of my life, and I end up with her ugly older sister, who I don't like. I mean, used car dealers are famous for like making substitutions and so forth and giving you a car with not such a good radiator. But this is way beyond that.
Bait and switch.
Really badly, yes. I mean, Lavan, if Lavan is still alive, he's clearly selling stuff on eBay. So that was a joke. All right, never mind. I'm trying. But there's no evidence that I know of that Lavan wanted to kill his son-in-law. His son-in-law is now the husband of 2 of his daughters. Killing him would be kind of counterproductive, especially because he's getting so much, free or cheap labor out of him, so it doesn't make.
Rabbi, is it pronounced Laban or Laban?
In Hebrew,
both?
Lavan. In Hebrew, Lavan. In English, it could be Laban.
Okay.
So in all these words, everything I talk to in Hebrew, there's at least two or, like Pesach in Hebrew, Passover in English. And then there's like a Americanized version of the Hebrew. So all of these things are, we're American Jews, so we use a lot of like anglicized Hebrew words that don't sound right to an Israeli and they don't sound right to an American because they're somewhere in between.
You're looking for a bargain.
Yes, but they're not finding a bargain here, and instead,
That's
whoever
true.
our ancestor is being chased by somebody to be killed. So now Ibn Ezra says that that this is Jacob, and why? Because Jacob had come from Aram Naharaim, and then it is again Lavan who's trying to kill him. If it's Abraham, who would be trying to kill him?
Oh, the brother.
There was a couple of brothers. He was also he'd also made enemies with his father. He'd also made enemies of the king there in Babylon, when he claimed to be monotheist, which sort of undermined the king's claims.
Yes.
Abraham had enemies, so I go with Pam. It makes, if we do accept this explanation, which I don't like, it makes more sense to see it as Abraham. But the commentaries seem to like the idea that it was Jacob for whatever reason. Okay, Minya, you can keep going.
Given the variety of interpretation of the words Arami Oved Avi, the ritual prayer could mean, my father was a fugitive, wandering or persecuted Aramean, referring to Abraham or Jacob. Or the text could mean, an Aramean sought to destroy my father. In other words, Laban schemed to destroy Jacob and his family. Most modern biblical scholars agree that the identification of either Abraham or Jacob as a fugitive Aramean is correct.
They don't listen to me. You see that?
Right.
I'm yelling and yelling from Arizona. Wait, no, I don't like that explanation. And the scholars ignoring me. So they like Rashi's explanation. What can I do? So there's two very different interpretations of this verse, completely different. Okay, comments or questions? Pam, Lorraine, Steve. I can't see Ray, so Ray, if you want to talk, I guess you have to just start talking. Anybody? Okay. Babette, do you want to continue reading?
Okay. The Mishnah.
About what
describes-
page are you on? I'm
We are
sorry.
on page 158, right-hand column, first whole column. We've just
Okay.
finished. So we talked about the biblical, I gave you, it wasn't in the text, but I read for you the whole passage from the
Okay, I
Torah
see.
that relates to this, which is from the beginning of Deuteronomy chapter 26. You can look that up if you want. And we talked about what the Torah says, which is not clear. We talked now what the medieval commentary said. Now we're going back to basically the Talmud. The Mishnah is the first part of the Talmud. So we're going back chronologically. Okay, Babette.
Okay, the Mishnah describes the colorful celebration of offering the first fruits at the Temple of Jerusalem. In each town throughout the land of Israel, prayer groups would gather. They would celebrate during the evening. In the morning, they would commence their pilgrimage to Jerusalem, led by a flute player, followed by an ox with horns, overlaid with gold, and a wreath of olive leaves on its head. That's very interesting with gold, right? Because we're not supposed to do that, right? When they reached Jerusalem, they sent messengers to the temple and prepared their first fruits for offering. As they marched through the city, the people of Jerusalem would greet them saying, "Welcome to Jerusalem." When they reached the temple of the Levites, they would break into song.
Okay. Who can summarize what so the Mishnah is the basic part of the Talmud. So they're kind of codifying what the early rabbis thought was done in the times of the temple. They're writing after the temple was destroyed, probably, maybe before, but probably after. And what are they saying? Who can summarize for me just a few sentences about what was going on? Riva, Pam, Riva.
Yeah, they're celebrating, including a parade.
Okay, good. So it's kind of like Harvest Festival, Independence Day, New Year's Eve. They have these first fruits. They have these prayer groups. They would have celebrations. Then they have a big march from their town all the way down to Jerusalem with a band. They've got, well, at least a flute player. And they have animals decorated with fancy stuff. And then they bring the first fruits to the temple. The people who are living in Jerusalem greet them. So it's like a Macy's Day Parade or a Thanksgiving. What was the Macy's Thanksgiving Day? Was it?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's kind of like that, except it wasn't just down Fifth Avenue. It was from all these towns in northern and southern and eastern Israel, all the way to Jerusalem.
But
So
what's with
it's
the
like-
gold offerings? You know?
And there must have been a lot of vendors on the road selling lemonade, and the people with tents, and the Hilton would offer special deals. If you stay at the Garden Court Hotel, you get, and then you go to Jerusalem and you bring your voucher back, you get half price. So it was quite a festive, and it was like everybody's on the move. It was like one big hike. Yes, Pam.
Do you think Christianity borrowed this concept for when Jesus marches into Jerusalem with palm fronds and a big parade and all that?
Well, I wouldn't use the word borrowed. I mean, Jesus was a Jew functioning in a Jewish society, so this is part of that process. Yes, I don't know if Jesus was marching in this particular event.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Jews of Israel did this sort of thing on various occasions, and Jesus was participating in that. So for sure, but I don't think that they quote unquote stole it. It just emphasized the Jewish setting of early Christianity. It's completely in a Jewish setting. Steve.
It's like going to Disney World or Disneyland where you have the parade of characters and they're just overwhelmingly welcoming you. That's the sense I get.
Yeah. Marcia.
And, they didn't have Netflix and they didn't have cable or shows, plays and shows. You've got to make some sort of show for the people to show the good part. You can't keep saying the bad things are happening to you and you better do this or else. There's got to be an upside. And this is one of the upsides of the joyous parts of the religion that they're showing as a group and making it as a group celebration, showing a unity and making it joyful.
Mm-hmm. Very joyful. And I like hiking. I like fruit. And I like traveling. This is a holiday meant for
Puts
me.
it all together. Yeah.
So, okay, inside the temple, Babette.
Okay, inside the temple, holding their baskets, they would recite, I acknowledge this day, my father was a fugitive Amaran. Wherefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil to you. Adonai has given me. The long walk up to Jerusalem, the parade through the streets, the musical entrance into the temple, and the drama of reciting their declaration with basket in hand must have made a powerful impression and filled them with memories of a lifetime.
So that sounds great. But again, you see, the translation used here is my preferred translation. I like that. So who was my father was a wandering Aramean or fugitive Aramean? It's Abraham, right? And I like this idea that we all in our congregation spiritually, symbolically descend from this wandering couple, Abraham and Sarah, who started out in Mesopotamia, and they had these religious ideas, and they gathered together followers, and they traveled around. It's a little bit like the Mormons' origin story, or maybe more accurately, the Mormons seem to have used some of the elements of our story in their story. And Abraham wandered around, and here, look at us now. We're in Jerusalem bringing the first fruits. Our ancestors, the wandering Arameans, are not wandering anymore. We've got a temple. We've got a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a nice ending to a very interesting story. Sai.
Moses is no longer there, correct? And so I'm curious, who's kind of running the show?
This is still
yet.
In this week's Parsha, Moses is still giving his final speech. This is his very final speech. So Moses, he says, I'm going to die. God's not letting me into the Holy Land. And I've got like all these sermons on my hard drive I didn't use. So I'm going to deliver them all to you people before I die. So he then goes out and delivers a bunch of sermons, one after the other. And this is one of his speeches.
But they're not in Israel yet.
Correct.
Okay.
But remember, Sai, that what the Torah says is happening is not necessarily the same chronology of what was actually happening, right? So we don't know when it was written and where the writer was, but
Together.
according to the text, it's written, it's spoken by Moses before entering into the land of Israel. He's saying, when you, I'm sorry, Ray? Okay, Marcia?
If they're not in Israel, where's this fruit coming from?
Wait,
Well,
I have my calendar here.
The story
This
says
is the
this,
25th.
I'm sorry, Ray? Okay, she's,
Just,
so according to the Torah, Moses is saying, I think it started at the very beginning. If you want to look at your Torahs, the text at the very beginning of chapter 26 starts, when you have come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess.
Oh,
Moses is saying, in the
Okay.
future, in the
All
near
right, gotcha.
future, I'm going to die right now.
Okay.
And I picked out a nice grave at Sunland Cemetery. Joshua is going to lead you into the land, and then you're going to settle down, and then you're going to have this great ceremony.
Okay,
So
got it.
now, as I said to Sai, that's not necessarily the actual order that these took place in reality. We don't know, but this is the order as it's presented in the Torah right here. Okay?
He's giving them his marching order, their marching order, so to speak.
And he's predicting the future a little bit too. You know, he's saying this is what's going to happen. You know, and so, and apparent, it may very well have actually been taking place in Israel. You know, some things in the Torah may never have happened. You know, like when they say, you know, there was some holiday to be celebrated or something in the future, doesn't mean that it was actually done. But in this case, this ceremony presumably was done in the temple for hundreds of years, but I don't know that for a fact. Miriam and then
But
Marcia.
at least he let him see the land. He wasn't in the land, but he could see the land, right?
Oh, yes, Moses goes up. God says, come up to the mountain, I'll show you the land. And Moses said, but why can't you let me in?
Right.
And God says, tough luck. You know, Marcia and then Pam.
I forgot what I was going to say, so let Pam
Okay,
go.
Pam and then Sai.
I think showing Moses the land and not letting him enter was a punishment.
I agree with you.
I don't
Like
think it's a
so-
reward.
Like showing us this
Yeah.
chocolate cake, but not letting us eat any.
Giving us a
Right.
little
I thought it's
taste of
very
the land.
cruel. Mm-hmm.
Like, that could lead me to kill my Aramean ancestor if you torture me with chocolate cake enough. Sai.
Well, I would assume that not too much later, they do enter the land of Israel. And again, I want to get back to my question, in as much as they didn't have a king, who was running the show?
Joshua.
Joshua was chosen.
According to the Torah anyway, Joshua takes over from Moses.
Yes,
Now, reading between the lines, it looks like these judges and, you know, Moses and the Israelites, when Moses was still alive, began setting up quite a government. You know, there was these judges, they were these elders, there were different groups of senior administrators. So reading between the lines, I don't think Joshua had nearly as much power as Moses had had, but Joshua is considered the leader, the upfront guy. Lorraine, did you want to say something?
No, I was
Okay.
fixing my hair.
Okay, Minya, did you want to say something? No. Okay, Babette?
Okay. Is this what Moses had in mind when he defined the ritual drama of the first fruits offering? Did he envision a musical parade? Why was a fixed formula of declaration put into the mouth of the worshiper? Why wasn't the prayer a spontaneous declaration or a prayer of thanks to God for the abundant fruits of the harvest? Why was the prayer about the past, about suffering, misery, and oppression? Moses,
Well, and stop for a second. Comments, Marcia.
I remembered what I was going to ask you. Is this the part on the Torah scroll where Moses has some poetry at the end of the Torah?
It's not too far, but it's not this part, no.
It's not that part. Okay, all right.
But
Because I
there is-
remember it.
There
from
is some
the
ancient
Torah.
poetry that's not too far.
Okay, but that's not it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So why did Moses set it up this way? Do you like the idea that there's a set declaration? I mean, if Lorraine, if you're in the condo next to Miriam in Netanya and you're going to march with her to Jerusalem with your first fruits, and you get to Jerusalem after 3 or 4 days of hiking, does it make you more comfortable or less comfortable that when you present your first fruits, there's a text to read rather than just make up your own prayer?
Yeah, I like that.
So if you have to make up your own prayer, you'll be worried you won't say the right thing, or you will be too tired to say anything, or here you just read what they tell you. Okay, Marcia.
Isn't
And
that Moses sort of a control freak?
then Marcia, is that a nice thing to say about our
Well,
ancestors?
you know what I mean. I mean, he's going to die, but he wants to make sure that when the Israelites get into Israel, everything is just so. And it was the way he visualizes the way he pictures it. And this is the way it's going to be, you know? So am I not wrong though? Am I wrong, I should say?
Rabbi, this is Ray. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Yes,
You can hear me? This is Ray.
yeah.
We hear you.
It seems to me that Moses was forced to have others help him in their daily routines. And they came to them they came through the judges. Not all of them had to come directly to Moses, but Moses knew something about human ways, and he wanted to be certain that the continuity of coming together at certain times and the daily thankfulness for what they had received, the natural things they had received, food, rain, the whole bit. And he's trying to get them to remember. I think this is true throughout our rules. A man gets up in the morning and he thanks God. We say a prayer of thanksgiving, grace, 3 times when we eat. There's constant making us remember that it's not only us, there's something beyond us that we call God that has helped us get these things that we need. I think that was his concern. He wanted to be sure and therefore set a bunch of things for them to do. That's what I'm done now. Thank you for permitting me.
Marcia.
unmute.
Marcia, you have to unmute.
Was I wrong in saying that Moses is lining things up into the future because he wants it done the way he wants it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he wants to continue being the leader, clearly. And it's all, and that's probably why God wouldn't let him go into Israel, because, you can't have one guy dominating political discourse. It would be like if we still had FDR as president today. People would be like, when is this guy going to retire? Like he did good stuff in the 40s or 30s, but we're almost 100 years later and this guy is still here. And we all know people like that don't want to let go. And sometimes they can hold on for a long time until, it can Pam and then Cy and then Marcia. And then let's get a few new voices that haven't spoken.
Well, do you think that Moses is being the control freak, sort of, because his chosen successor, Joshua, needs to have a detailed roadmap?
I guess, Joshua is not emerging as that strong a leader, and it's very hard. It's very hard to, to be a strong leader when you're under somebody else's. They're criticizing now the generals who organized this withdrawal from Afghanistan. In the papers this morning, the general in charge of the Air Force base there is criticized for his decision to, leave the base, but he's doing what his bosses in the military and in the political world wanted. So if he'd said to them, no, this is a bad idea, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him and he could get fired, basically. So on one hand, he has to go with what the bosses want if he wants to keep his job or keep his status in his job. On the other hand, so it's very hard to be the second or third or be, and under Moses, who is such a dominant, larger than life kind of personality, how can you develop the sort of the reputation and the leadership you need? So not an easy situation. Cy and then Marcia and then Rita.
I think that Moses was a figment of the authors of the Bible. He was a constant figure. He was the person, the it that was able to speak for the authors themselves. They needed somebody that would have some significance as a carry-on, and they used Moses to do that kind of a job. So Moses kept going on and on and on until finally one author decided, well, Moses had enough, as you point out, and he dropped him. A very arbitrary thing. But I think that really is what went on.
Okay, Marcia and then Reva.
Well, I believe in Moses, but I think God is setting up term limits there. So no more Mitch McConnell. We're moving on. So, it's a situation like that. You've got to let the new people lead at some point. And I'm sure they're going to follow Moses's sermons and his rules that as of going into Israel, but new things will come up as they go along,
Reva.
Yeah, on the second paragraph, the following Parak Aleph, in the beginning, it says, Israelites are to continue the ritual drama. And to me, this comes off as extremely theatrical.
Right.
Here's the setting, here's how we set up the stage, here's the script, here are your lines. This is what you should say. And so it really is interesting because I think for theater, this is very, very early.
Right. It's like a Macy's Day Thanksgiving parade, with the floats, and they didn't have words, but, everybody's got their theme and their costumes and,
But it was important to have that because you had to give people something that they would enjoy.
It tries to explain a little bit of the history and the main ideas in a very colorful way. Babette.
Well-
Babette and then Minya.
Well, even though Moses might have had a speech impediment, he thought well on his feet. He expressed himself very well and was a very powerful person in that respect. And perhaps Joshua didn't have that ability. He was a good thinker. He could have been a leader, but he couldn't develop the idea or think on his feet so fast. So he needed to have a plan. I mean, they said that about Jesus. He was a skinny guy, you know, and gaunt, but he was a powerful speaker and a wonderful thinker. So Moses was a more natural leader than Joshua.
How do you know that? I
Well,
mean, does it say that Joshua wasn't a good speaker?
Well, why did he need a roadmap? You know,
Well,
he
this is
needed a guide
supposition.
before
This
he
is-
opened his mouth.
And the sixth book of the Bible is the book of Joshua, but you never hear about that because it's mostly about military conquest. So, but I guess it makes sense that after such a visionary, you have somebody who's more low key and more of a technical expert, right? So you don't hear as much, you know, after like the founders of Google, for example, you know these two guys that founded it, but the people running it today, they're not as famous because they're running the business. They're not talking about big ideas so much. Miriam.
But they had to give Joshua a break. He was just starting out.
All right, I'm giving him a break.
Okay.
I didn't say a bad word about him. It's these other people. Minya?
I was just thinking more about what Marcia said about being a control freak. And I was wondering if it was more, he had led these people through so much. Was he concerned before he handed over power what his legacy would be?
Oh, very much. That's why he's belting out all these speeches at the end. You know, he seems almost obsessed about his legacy, right? And this we see politicians today, you know, when they're finishing up their office, they're very worried about their legacy. They don't want to be written up in the history books as a buffoon. You know, so Governor Cuomo had to resign. I don't think he's upset about so much about leaving the governorship, and he's going on a long vacation and he's got plenty of money, but he's worried that the history books are going to talk about the governor who resigned in disgrace and how, you know, the COVID thing with the nursing homes, you know, that he killed all these people and stuff. So he's worried about his legacy and how he's going to be portrayed. Cy, Pam, Lorraine, B. I think we lost Larry again. Steve? Okay. Babette, are you still there?
Well, I'm here, but something happened with the computer. I can't see you, but I can hear you, so I'll read.
Okay. So
I'll-
before you continue, we're at the very bottom of page 158, at the very bottom right-hand corner, Moses Maimonides. So we're moving to the medieval period. And Maimonides, of course, is a philosopher. So he's not so much interested in the history as he is in terms of what is the religious importance of this section. So he's not interested, he's not really that interested in the exact translation and who did what. He's interested in what conceptual values is this trying to convey. Okay, Babette.
Moses Maimonides addresses the questions in the Guide for the Perplexed 3.39, offering the first fruits of the harvest he says, is a way people accustom themselves to being generous and a means of limiting the human appetite for more consumption, not only of food, but of property. Maimonides views the ritual drama in an antidote to materialism and overindulgence. People who amass fortunes and live in comfort, he observes, often fall victim to self-esteem excesses and arrogance. They tend to abandon ethical considerations because of increasingly selfish concerns. Bringing a harvest basket of first fruits and reciting the prayer promotes humility. Maimonides also points out that it is essential to recall previous experiences of suffering and distress in times of ease. Such recollections remind us of the human experience in a mixture of success and failures, of joys and disappointments. History, like the life of the human being, is complex and often frustrating. People often become cynical and abandon their hopes and dreams.
Okay, stop. Comments. Maimonides, do you like what he's saying?
Yes.
Marcia doesn't. Why?
Marcia, unmute, please.
Unmute.
I'm going on and on. Okay. I said, I don't think so. I think a basket of fruit is not going to be that much of a donation. I think the coming together to thank God is the point and not the humility of the donation. I don't think that Maimonides was actually on the, I'm sorry, I can't argue with Maimonides, but I don't think that that's the point.
Oh man, she's attacking my hero.
It's gotta happen.
Steve, can we ban her?
So we've got to ban Sai. He doesn't even believe in Moses at this point.
I don't believe in Maimonides.
Well, you know what happened to Madoff, right? He was super
What?
rich and screwed everybody, including his kids.
What has that got to do with this?
No, but he had such abundance, right? He had a thirst for such abundance and accumulation, but he was not sharing it.
But this is not shit. This is a basket of fruit. They got a whole orchard back there.
Well,
You
they
know,
talked
this
about
is more of a celebration of the gifts
materialism
of
and
God.
overindulgence, right?
I don't believe what he's saying is right, though.
Well,
Well,
but
what's the difference between bringing a basket of food or coming together, as you said? It's sort of, this time they bring a basket of fruit, but they are getting together.
It's not the point of the humility. It's not the point of sharing the food. It's the point of thanking God for the food and joining as a nation to thank God for abundance.
Right, but thanking God, they're still doing that, even if they didn't bring the basket of fruit.
It's the words that I'm talking. Yeah, they don't even need the
semantics.
Right.
Plus, it's Jewish tradition to bring food.
Riva, comment?
Yeah, we've gone on and on about the ritual drama and how you set it up and how people move and the music and etc. And finally, we get to Maimonides, who says, why are we doing this? What is the message underneath all this schlepping around?
Right.
I
And
love
that's
it.
why I like him. That's why I like him. Lorraine?
I love the way she put it. She's making me laugh. It's true.
And you can see the parallel in the temple. You know, we have that big basket, you know, of stuff that's not real, but it's designed to, you know, to symbolize the obligation in Judaism to find food for other people who need it, but something like that.
But I don't, what I'm subjecting to is the words that were being used that Maimonides, that they translate Maimonides using, you know, to validate this particular holiday.
And Marcia, do you not like his second point that even when things are good, you want people to remember that things used to be bad, so they
No,
maintain a
I agree
certain-
with that. I agree.
That point you agree with. And part of maybe our problem as Americans dealing with coronavirus is that, you know, very few of us really had much awareness of previous plagues. You know, I'd studied in graduate school about the Black Plague of 1348, 1350.
Right.
But even then, it was I was interested in it because it seemed something that was so medieval that it would never possibly happen today. It never occurred to me that there'd be a modern parallel. So I was drawn to it because it seemed something uniquely medieval. And really none of us remembered the Spanish flu, you know, 1918, 1919 that killed so many people. It was like completely glossed over in history because, you know, anyway, so I think if we'd maybe known more about that part of our history, we would have been a little bit better prepared. Marcia, and then if Lorraine wants to talk.
I'll be quick. I mean, the Spanish flu, the pneumonia plague, my grandfather died in it. When anybody asked what happened to him, oh, he died in the pneumonia in 1918 or whatever. I mean, nobody really talked about it. It was just, it happened, you know, kind of thing. And I think that, you know, we should be reviewing what happened then because we can see the parallels, you know, what we should have been doing. Yeah.
Actually, I don't even remember hearing about it when I
Really?
was a child growing up, really. I
Good.
was born during the Spanish flu, but I was a baby. I knew nothing about it, but I never heard anybody refer to it, really.
Right.
My mother lost a brother.
Yeah. And my
My mother-
grandfather, yeah.
I
My
don't think,
mother,
I don't think you have to look very far to ancient times right now, both in Haiti and in Afghanistan. You don't have to look very far to know that there's going to be cholera right coming next.
That there's going to be what?
Cholera in Haiti and in Afghanistan.
Ah,
There'll be outbreaks.
And COVID. And
Yeah,
COVID.
and COVID for sure. You know,
well, my mother,
this is modern times, but a lot of people around the world live in a world that's like this ancient world.
my mother talked about the Spanish flu. She
Did
was
she?
the only,
I
she was the
never,
only,
we never talked about it.
my mother did. And she told me that that both her bosses died of it and she didn't get it. Of course, she lived a long life. She was very healthy. But also we had the polio epidemic. I remember it. That's
I remember the
reason-
polio, but I
Yes.
don't remember them talking about maybe that was overridden by the polio. I don't know. But
Well,
I
yeah. The reason
remember
we
the
went-
polio very well,
Yeah.
but
We were-
I don't
we were
remember
scared.
anything about the Spanish flu.
Well,
okay.
yeah, I remember about polio.
Go ahead, B. Sorry.
The polio epidemic led to us going to the Catskill Mountains in the summer because my father was afraid for us. And I remember we shared one room. We were immigrants. And my father would come up on weekends in the hack, a big car. But he wanted us out of the city in the summer because of polio.
And that's exactly Boccaccio's Decameron was a description of rich Italians leaving Rome or leaving Florence for the countryside to get away from the Black Plague.
Right.
So things don't change that much. And I guess with COVID, some people would leave left the cities for country locations as well. And that was facilitated by the ability to work remotely, which is what we're all doing right this very moment. And so but, you know, I don't think we were really well prepared. So Maimonides' point is good. Okay, back to you, Babette. We're at the left-hand column, page 159.
The triumph of freedom over oppression often evolves slowly through pain and setbacks and strong determination. Jacob suffers, his children endure hunger and homelessness. His grandchildren and subsequent generations are oppressed, tortured, and enslaved in Egypt. Without faith in God's liberating power, the Israelites would not have achieved freedom. It sustained them through the darkest hours. In offering the first fruits of the declaration, recalling their stormy history, the people underscored the importance of taking nothing for granted. This ritual, concludes Maimonides, helps us keep God's miracles fresh in memory and perpetuate faith.
Oh, that's beautiful. I like how Harvey words that. It does address Minya's comment toward the very beginning today. The faith in a better future is very important, but on the other hand, we can't promise, you know, so it's kind of a very delicate balance here, you know. And Minya says, well, doesn't it say here that if you're good, you'll be rewarded, and if you're bad, you'll be punished? And so if we're good, we should be rewarded, right? God guarantees that. And I didn't really want to go along with that because, you know, I can't, right? Because we know that doesn't always work out. But on the other hand, I didn't want to reject it either because of what, you know, Harvey Fields writes here. Without faith in God's liberating power, the Israelites would not have achieved freedom. So you have to have faith even when it's objectively not necessarily warranted. And that's hard to do, right? And, you know, Minya sent me yesterday an article from the Washington Post about that there was a house in Germany with a phony wall. And in 1990, the people who bought it, were renovating, and they broke through the wall and they found a bunch of stuff that were hidden there by Jews who'd lived there before they were deported to their deaths. And there were some letters, there was some jewelry, and there was a big, big family Bible. And the jewelry disappeared. The letters were thrown out, apparently, which is quite tragic. But the Bible, the guy held on to for 30 years. Then he sold it on eBay for $75. And eventually the person who bought it donated it to the local synagogue, and the local synagogue, somebody got in touch with somebody else, and they made contact with the US Holocaust Museum. And eventually they traced it, that this couple that was killed had a son who survived, moved to New York, and his son's widow is 97 or 94, and she's still alive. And her grandson, who's the great great grandson of the couple that were killed, is like in his early 20s, is like 27 years old. So they got somebody in Germany to carry it on the plane and bring it to the family. And they presented it to the family, and there's all these great photos of the great grandson with the Bible and how he, you know, used it to learn from his grandmother, who's not. She married the son of the people killed, but she's also a Holocaust survivor, and it helped him bond with her and learn about the Holocaust. So this is a very minor victory, right? You know, the people were murdered, you know, and almost their whole family was murdered. So, you know, only Jews could weave this into such an optimistic, uplifting story, right? Because it's really a very minor victory. And yet, I guess the Jewish, part of the Jewish skill is to balance the bad with the good, and somehow to remain optimistic and have some faith, even in the face of what objectively would not be good circumstances. Pam.
And I think the key word in Maimonides there is the word freedom. I mean, as Jews, we should always be appreciating our freedom, because history has tried to take it away from us a number of times. And I think that's a good reason why they have this ceremony, is to appreciate that freedom.
Okay. Minya, is my interpretation acceptable to you?
Very well done. I was just so impressed with the size of that book and the fact that they didn't want to take a chance losing it by mailing it, and they had the person carry it.
Riva, Bonnie, Miriam.
Those stories always remind me of the scattered shards, which is, I guess, we talk about, and somehow some piece of it finds its proper place finally. And I love that. It's beautiful.
And that's a mystical concept. We did a Kabbalah course about a year ago where we talked about that, the Nitznitzim. Steve?
Yes, sir.
Any comments?
No comments. I'm listening, absorbing it all.
Babette, B, Lorraine? Okay, one more paragraph, Babette.
Okay. For Rashbam, the ritual is more than a means of recalling the past and the Jewish people's reliance upon God's miracles. Rashbam points out that each participant standing inside the temple with the basket of first fruits becomes a part of a significant drama, a highly personal confession. Identifying with Abraham, the worshiper declares, "My father Abraham was a wandering Amram." By this, he means to say that my parent, not somebody else's, but mine, were lost, and my relatives suffered in Egypt, were liberated, and fought to conquer the land of Israel. They were victorious, and I hold this basket of fruits because of God's help. Rashbam believes that for the pilgrim, this ritual is a life-transforming moment of identification with one's ancestors and with the truth that the fruits of the basket and the liberation from Egypt are not the accomplishments of human beings alone. It is God's will that transforms seeds into fruit. It is God's will that frees the captive. Rashbam sees each participant in the temple ritual arriving at this conclusion. My parents came from a strange land where they were slaves to this good and prosperous land. Now in gratitude, I am bringing the first fruits of the land to the temple because I realize that this bounty is not of my doing, but I enjoy it through God's mercy.
Very nice. And Rashbam is Rashi's grandson, by the way, you probably know that. And so here, on one hand, we're a tribe. So we identify with Abraham as our, and Sarah as our ancestors, our original ancestors. Or spiritual ancestors. Now, were they really our ancestors? I guess not. And did they exist? We don't know, but they're our ancestors. So that kind of bonds us together, that we all feel this connection through the ancestors. And then, then Rashbam says it's not just connection, identification with ancestors, but it's also bringing in the idea of God into this first fruits. that each participant in the first fruit ceremony, is able to make this declaration, which says that I'm part of this long chain of tradition, and the benefits that we have are because not only of communal unity, but also because of God's love for us. So it's kind of a beautiful ceremony, and it's a beautiful, and I guess in the Reformed temple, something like this was done. It was called consecration with the kids in nursery school who were about to start religious school. And that was done in the fall. And then in the spring, you had the confirmation, with the confirmation students being confirmed. So consecration at the beginning and confirmation at the end. And these were based on biblical models. Okay, one or two final short comments, and if not, I'll turn it over to Steve for the final blessing.
Miriam has a comment.
Okay, Miriam.
So we all have Aramean blood. That's my comment.
And Miriam, I'm going to start teaching a course on how to speak and read Aramean, so you'll be able to feel more Aramean. What? You're not going to take the course? Oh, I'm disappointed. Okay, over to Steve for the final blessing, and thank you. And remember, our ancestor was a wandering Aramean, and therefore, God helped us with all this beautiful fruit. When you eat fruit, think of our Aramean ancestors. Okay, Steve.
Okay, let us conclude with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan לנו
בחיים
Baruch
העולם נתן בתוכנו,
Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, has given us the fruit
of truth,
planted within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Be safe, be careful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Welcome back, Pam.